I'll introduce myself, Terry Ham. I live on Alden Ave in Dartmouth, and Finance Committee Chair. Thank you so much for, meeting once again this week. This must be the Planning Board's third meeting this week, I think, right? And we appreciate the time that you've taken to talk with us. And we're gonna open up in a minute and then have the Planning Board go through. I'll ask Christine to present the 5 articles and where we are with them. She'll say a couple of words on the budget, and then we'll let the Planning Board, well, we might have, I think it's fair to say, and I'm one woman, but I think it's fair to say that there is a room for some conversation to be had among the boards in the town of Dartmouth in terms of the future. And what form that's going to take, I'm not sure. Some of us have been looking at what other towns do. This town, when I joined the Finance Committee, I was looking for the strategic plan for the town. There isn't one. There is not a kind of guiding set of goals and objectives and principles. We have a lot of plans, and people do a really good job in their particular areas, but we really don't have a central set of processes or priorities that when a crisis like this hits, we can turn to and say, this is kind of where we're going. And that, in just my opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody else, I'm just, in my opinion, I think that would be a good thing to have sometime soon. We're going to have to make our way through this process the best we can right now and figure out what we're going to do about the specifics that are on the agenda, because we have to. But I do think, and I hope we can figure this out with select board, et cetera, how we can proceed. I think our committee has talked a little bit about this, and we'll keep talking, and we might come up with a couple of ideas or proposals and send them out to people. Obviously, school committee needs to be involved, but what's a little hard in the conversation, for example, that we're going to have tonight, we're going to talk about some issues that could have an impact on the town as a whole, and from different points of view, how do we decide that the way that we do? And we're going to have to make the best of that based on what people say. That's my soapbox to get us started. Why don't I just open the meeting, say again, thank you everybody for coming. You want to do introductions, or do people feel like you know who people are just by the sign? Raise your hand if you want to do introductions. All right, awesome. Well, Adam, sorry, we'll have to get back to you later. So I guess when you speak, do like I did and say who you are and where you live, and if you have something to add to the conversation. But let's begin with the emails that I sent out to everybody on the Finance Committee. I feel like I sent a lot. There was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions about them or about the agenda tonight? Okay, so then let's get right at it. Christine, do you want to say a couple of words on the budget proposal? And then if you want to just begin by saying, oh, I know what I wanted to say. Some of the information that you received was labeled Article A, B, C, D, and E. If you open your table of contents to the spring annual town meeting, so 18 is A. I am going to have to recuse myself from that discussion because I have been involved in some aspects of this that could be construed as having a personal interest. So I'm going to have to step out of that conversation. I'm going to ask Gloria to take over for that. Number 19 on our contents is Article B, according to the Planning Board. Number 20 is Article C. Number 21 you would think was D, but it's not, it's E. And 22 is D. So if you're trying to go between 2 pages, you might see them labeled in that way. Are we ready to begin? Okay, Christine.
Hi everyone, my name is Christine O'Grady. I'm the Director of Planning. I have 2 machines open right now so that I can ultimately show you the map. So in case you're wondering why I have 2 going, that's the reason. I would also say to you, as far as the maps go, I know that the town website has some maps right now on it. They're JPEGs, they're not PDFs. I'm having some issues with size. Mike O'Reilly and I are gonna work some of those logistics out. I think the maps that you'll see tonight and the maps that the planning board have are much more in tune with the direction that we're going. They're pretty similar format to all maps that have been done in the past. Just trying to make some consistency amongst the maps that we're working with. So that being said, that's just the logistics of it. I know that Mike is in the background and he will help me. I usually rely on Peter for these things, but Peter has warned Michael of my inabilities sometimes. So the first thing is the budget, the planning department budget. We are asking for level funding. It's approximately $146,000. Obviously, the majority of that goes to salaries. Sometimes we have to transfer money within the line items based on how many public hearings we have, how much postage we need to do other than, those type of things. But pretty much it's exactly the same as it's been the last few years, or since I've been here, I should say. So that's it on the budget. I don't know if anybody has any questions with regard to that for me.
Does anybody have any questions on the budget? Okay, very good.
Very good. All right, so now we'll go on to the articles. So the first article.
So Christine, I'm going to turn this over to Gloria.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first item is Article A, and that is the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. I'm going to put the map up, and I'll continue to speak as we talk through that. That way, you can be looking at the map as I talk through it. Well, let me see here. Sorry. Can you all see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So basically what this one is, like I said, it's the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. And this amendment request came about because we had received a letter. Well, I'll read you the thing I actually wrote. The amendment to the Aquifer Protection Map and the amendment to and revision of the bylaw was initiated by DPW per a letter from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, directing the town of Dartmouth to adopt a new Aquifer Protection Map as part of a technical review of the DPW Water Management Act permit amendment application order to complete. Basically, the town has been involved or has had gone through this application process since 1992, so you've been in it a while. This is a pretty standard procedure. One of the orders to complete in this is to actually update the map, and in doing so, we have to update the bylaw and the reference to the map within the bylaw. So I worked with town council to come up with a consistent naming strategy going forward, and so for that, and then we're also changing the names to be consistent throughout. And then in going through the actual bylaw to make sure that everything was in order, we found some minor revisions, some terminology that's no longer applicable, or some references to regulations that were once part of, say, something like the Board of Health or something like that. Those applications have been, or regulations have been rescinded over the years, and the bylaw just didn't keep consistent with that. So these changes are all as a result of that. We're not changing any strategy or existing procedures. We're just kind of cleaning up the process. I know that Teresa had asked me the other day where this comes from. So it comes from one of the 310 CMR, the Massachusetts Regulations 4.0. The town of Dartmouth has 180 days from the initial letter that DPW received with these conditions in it to adopt the map, which is why it's so important at town meeting. The timing of it works out. So that's why it has to be done at this town meeting. It can't wait till future town meetings. What happens, I know that Teresa had also asked me, what happens if this does not go through? The review letter, so the review letter that DPW received states that failure to comply with the map change may result in DPW considering the town's application as withdrawn. So there are consequences if we do not move forward with this. I can tell you, I brought it before all of the, we have a number of technical department heads in town that review things all together. So somebody, usually the DPW, we have the town engineer, the building commissioner, we bring the fire chiefs in. So I did bring everybody in on this case to review it. Again, so any terminology changes are the result of the state fire code or the state building code or the, consistency with Board of Health regulations or with wetlands. So any minor revisions, again, are the result of my collaboration with all of those groups. I did reach out to Dave Hickox again today just to make sure that I clarified. So basically what the map shows, and you'll be able to see it closer at town meeting. I don't know if I can zoom in on it now. It shows what is referred to as the Violetta wells. And basically what's happening there were 3 wells, and now they're being replaced by two wells. And the reason they're being replaced is because the 3 wells are at the end of their lifespan. The two new wells have the same yield as the 3 existing wells. So there is no increase in withdrawing or anything like that. It impacts the Zone 2 designation, which you can see on the map is kind of like the blue area, and all municipalities per DEP regulations are required to make sure that that's consistent. The overall outline and the locations of the wells really haven't changed. I mean, it's very, very minimal. It's just more to make sure that the right procedures and the right references are in place. So that's the first one. I don't know if anybody has any questions with regard to that you would like to ask.
Well, I have a question. So there was an email sent out today, Terry, that Christine, you had forwarded regarding this with the DEP letter.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it attached. So I don't know if everyone else got it, if that's something that could be forwarded again.
So I only gave the first page of the DEP letter. I am somewhat uncomfortable, and I had explained this in subsequent in other emails. It's not really my place as the planner to forward a DEP letter that goes to Dave Hickox. I'm somewhat concerned with water resources and the protection thereof. Other cities and towns that I've worked with in the past would never let these types of things go forward. I know that there are a lot of open meeting laws and stuff, but there's the potential to have, a water resource in jeopardy, or, so I'm hesitant to do it. So anything that came forward other than that first page is coming from Dave Hickox. And I know he had sent some additional information today. What I would say to you is the first page pretty much takes you through the basics of it. That's where I got most of my information for the little write-up that I provided you all.
Well, that's what I'm asking, if everyone else received that first page, because I did not.
Uh-oh.
Did anyone else receive it from FinCom?
I received it from Christine, I think.
Right. Yeah, but you're the planning board, so you're
Right.
I asked that Dave Hickox forward it to any other boards and commissions that went forward. So as far as I know, you should have, I know you definitely got the first page from me, or you should have gotten the first page, because I provided all of that to Teresa, and then she forwarded it to your board. I did not try to send anything directly to your board, to the finance committee. I let it go through the chair. So I don't know.
The first page of a letter from who to who?
So it's from the Department of Environmental Protection to David Hickox.
I have that.
You do?
Yeah, I think David Cox sent those. He sent 3 letters out today.
All right, I'll have to look again for that. Anyone have any questions of Christine regarding this? Bob?
Yeah, I went on the website and tried to look at the legend. And the light green means, what does the light green mean?
I'm sorry. So I have, again, we're
Powder
having
blue.
Mike O'Reilly and I. So what it is I used the existing color scheme that Mike had worked with in the past. Again, it was just some minor revisions and some formatting in this particular case. Basically, the wellhead area, which is the small circle area, is pink with a blue dot in the center. So that's considered zone 1. part of what we changed in the regulation is it used to refer to it as areas 1, 2, and 3. They're now zones 1, 2, and 3 to match what DEP puts forward.
Right.
The green area is considered zone 3, and that's land area. So each one has a definition from the town, from the state. So what I would say is zone 1 is the 400-foot protection radius around a public water supply well. Zone 3 is the green area, and that's land behind the area of zone 2 from which surface water comes from. The zone 2 is kind of like a light blue color, and that's the area of an aquifer that contributes water to the well under the, it does not make sense. I'll have to read that again. I'll have to go back over the note here. So green is zone 3, I'm sorry. So I have kind of just below State Road area is the Pinelli Wellfield wells. So there is the one Pinelli Wellfield, and then there's wells 1, 2, and 3. A little bit further south of that is the Viola wells, which are the Violetta wells, which are the 2 that have replaced the 3 existing ones in that same general area. Over to the other side of, slightly over, are wells B and C, and then just south of that are wells A, F1, and F2, and then the furthest south wells are wells D, E1, and E2. Again, none of those other ones have changed except for the Violetta ones. Those are the 2 that have modified slightly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Maybe not a question, just clarification if you don't mind, because it's really it's a certain language here that is unique. This is Beppy Heidekel. I live in South Dartmouth on Turn Lane, and I'm new to this committee and I'm new to all this, so I apologize for asking some of the basic questions. My understanding of what you've done here in Article A is just you aren't making any substantive changes to how the town is doing any of its aquifer protection. You're just trying to get the bylaws and our own language consistent or compliant with what the state requires.
Right.
That's what I think you're trying to do here. Is that correct?
The thing here is I have to update the map in accordance with the state requirements. So
Okay.
and while we're doing that at the same time, it was an opportunity to kind of clean up the bylaw and some issues that were found that town council.
Right. My follow-up question, to the extent that this might be controversial, it's because the town is planning to replace these wells, and some people might not like that, but that is not what is being addressed in this. This is just, that's going ahead separately. Am I correct? That's a separate.
The town is already doing whatever they're doing. I am not part of that process at all. I have been just asked to bring it forward.
Thank you. So you're just cleaning up, and we're just voting to clean up the language. If some people had some problems with a change in wells, that's a whole separate topic. So if we say no to this, it just means things will stop in the town. We won't get any approvals to go forward with a lot of things.
Right. As I said at the very beginning, they'll consider your application withdrawn. This is an ongoing, continuous application process.
That's what I understand. Thank you. That's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
And also, my understanding is that we have to make these changes to comply with, I thought it was FEMA, in order to qualify for federal flood insurance.
The FEMA one is the next one I'm going to describe to you.
Oh, okay.
This is your drinking water.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Christine, can you explain what is the most significant change to the map that's resulting from this?
The name, the title of the map, the date at the top that says when it was approved at town meeting. That is the most significant change. The minor change is there were in the Violetta Wells section area, there were 3 wells. Now there are 2 wells, which I had explained to you at the beginning. They're in the same basic location. I mean, they're not, if you put one map over the other, they don't, I mean, it just shows 2 dots instead of 3 dots. Again,
so that's basically it then.
The yield and the pull of water is exactly the same.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, sounds like we're all set.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. So, Article 19. You're gonna try to put up a map,
Yeah,
Christine?
I'm going to put up the other map. Yeah, okay. So in this particular case, this is the floodplain map. This one came about as a result of letters that are received from that are received by the select board to the town of Dartmouth. They've been going on for the past couple of years. FEMA, in this particular case, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has every so often they update what they call the panel maps, or the firms in town, which are the flood insurance rate maps. And basically what they do is they kind of just make sure that everything is correct. You know, nothing has changed as far as in, you know, locations or boundaries, which areas are actually in the floodplain protection districts, which ones are outside. So every so often we get an update. So when you're looking at the map over to the left-hand side, we have a contingent, I don't remember exactly how many, but there's a number that have changed in town this time around. Most of them require very minor changes. Some of them is just date. Some of them it's not, you know, it's not necessarily anything specific. Sometimes it could be a wave action thing, like if they anticipate certain wave action. We have one that was left from 2014 that they have not changed. And then we have a couple from 2009, which have not changed the last couple of rewrites. So this letter that I have ultimately received from the select board, which came from FEMA, like I said, has spelled out what is required of the town of Dartmouth with regards to this. And basically, we need to, once again, this is a map change that ended up bringing about some other changes. So the other piece of this is also, while we're working with FEMA on this, I'm also required to work with the Department of Conservation and Recreation in Massachusetts. They have an Office of Water Resources and Flood Management program. So I've also been working with that agency to make sure that everything is in place. Part of what they did was they had reviewed our existing map. They had provided us with the new panels. They've given us a new flood study, which is also referenced in the bylaw. They reviewed our existing bylaw to make sure the terminology that we had in it was correct. All of these things are required to be, basically the map is required to be accepted at town meeting prior to July 8th of this year. I can tell you that FEMA did send out guidance the end of last week saying that they don't care what's going on around the world. We've all had ample time to move forward with this, so they would like to have all cities and towns continue to move forward with this process. We are in a good position to do that. So the planning board is recommending that we do that. Again, if you lay this map over the previous floodplain maps, the overall outlines of things haven't really changed. In a couple of places, some sections were taken out of the floodplain. That means that anybody getting a mortgage that would have once been required to have flood insurance might not have to have that anymore. They won't have to have it if they're out of it. But for the most part, pretty much things have stayed the same. This is not just a coastal thing. This is anything, you know, rivers and, you know, other places that flood. So as you can see from looking at the map, you see that green area. It goes, you know, pretty far north in the town. So it impacts quite a few people. In this particular case, the green is considered Zone A. The yellowish color is AE, and the pinkish color is VE. I've given you on the map, I've explained what each thing is. The Zone A means it's the 100-year floodplain area where the base elevation has not been determined, so they really don't know exactly what the elevation would go to. The AE means the 100-year floodplain where the base elevation has been determined. And actually, if you zoom in on the map, in the southern section of town, it shows some elevation heights like 39, 34. So those things are all provided on the map. The Zone VE means a special flood hazard area. along the coast, subject to inundation by the 100-year flood, with additional hazards due to velocity or wave action. Base flood elevations have been determined in this area. Sorry, I just saw a typo, so I gotta correct this while I see it. Any changes to the actual bylaw as a result of this? Again, come about as the terminology has improved or changed. I did speak to various technical reviewers on this one, a slightly different group of individuals with regard to this to have them look it over. I did get some comments back from DCR, as I had said, so we were required to add another definition to our bylaw. Like I said with the last one, Teresa has asked me to explain to you what would happen if this is not approved at town meeting. And to be quite honest with you, what would happen is you would be suspended from the National Flood Insurance Program. What that ultimately means is anybody who has a mortgage that requires flood insurance, which many of them do in your town, would not be eligible to get into the program. Other cities and towns ultimately have, they've entered into a community rating system program. That is something that I'm working on in the town with Mike O'Reilly and obviously Sean's guidance. And we're working to get the town of Dartmouth into the process. I know that the town has tried prior to my getting here. There have been a few obstacles as to why they didn't get accepted into the program. We're good. At least it's good that we're in the National Flood Insurance Program. The CRS program, as the other one is referred to, is a component of the National Flood Insurance Program. And what that ultimately would mean is there's a potential for discounts on flood insurance rates for people. So like in the state of Rhode Island, you can get like a 15% discount on everybody's flood insurance. So it ends up being a sizable amount of money that's directly impacts families and businesses, that type of thing. So that's my ultimate goal here. But right now we need this map passed by July 8th so that you can stay in the program period, because you don't want to be kicked out of the National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay. Any questions?
Terry, can I just say something?
Yes. Yep.
Do you mind? Christine, there is a real possibility that town meeting will have to be delayed. I mean, it may be posted for June, but I'm not confident we're going to be actually having the meeting in June, and I'm not confident we may not even be having it in early July. So maybe we should be talking to our legislatures about this if they're going to quote unquote kick us out of the program.
Well, I do have the letter that I received last week says if we run into a real hardship with regard to this, they want to move forward the way we are now, this coming from FEMA. Again, it was directed to the select board. There are ways for us to, if our meeting does not actually go forward, not that we stumble and do whatever, but if our meeting does not go forward, there's opportunities for us to work with the federal and state agencies to work something out. I mean, I want everybody to understand, I mean, if we go to town meeting and it's just turned down, then that's not a good enough reason. I mean, if our meeting
if the governor still has an emergency and we can't congregate as 10 or more, I doubt we're going to have town meeting.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's the letter Christine received. They were stating, they do have some hardship leniencies, but a vote of no, not voting at a town meeting is not one of those. So I think that, there's many communities in this position, so they realize that, but they want, like Christine's saying, they want those communities to move forward.
Okay.
And our boards can do our work, and then you can take it from there. Right, Christine?
Mm-hmm.
Our boards can do our work and
I would keep moving as if it is. The other piece of this is I have gotten guidance from town council, and right now they're not thinking it's not, I mean, they're saying to me to proceed as if it's going forward. So that's what I'm trying to do.
So any questions about the article? Is it pretty much straightforward? The only question I had, Christine, is you talked about in terms of impact on residents, some people may not be required. Will there be people now who will be required because
Nobody new will be required. This will, if anything, lessen regulations. It will not increase anything.
Okay, thank you.
So then Article C is signage, and that is another one being sponsored by the planning board. That's just some minor revisions or corrections to the existing bylaw that was adopted in 2017. It seems when that article was drafted or updated, there were some Shriver errors or, some cut and paste errors that came about, and we're just trying to clean that up. So the planning board had been asked about whether or not we would be moving forward with that, and right now we are. It's not something that's of immediate concern, but it's an easy enough to fix, we think, in our, that's how the planning board is looking at it, that it can occur.
Any questions? Okay.
So the next one is, we refer to it as Article D, and that's the citizens petition. The planning board voted in this particular case not to recommend approval of this citizens petition at the town meeting. And basically what this petition is to rezone a property identified as map 56, lot 6 from single residence B to general business. It does abut the existing general business district, so it would be an easy opportunity to expand. But the planning board had concerns about the merit of it, of the petition, in the event that the proposed or the anticipated project that is being brought forward for that property would ultimately go forward. So they were concerned that if the solar farm in this particular case did not go forward in some capacity, then this land would be forever rezoned as general business. And they had some concerns about the location.
Okay, so this is where we have somebody who is from the citizen. I don't know if, Holly, if you wanted to speak or if you want somebody else to speak for you, but I'll let you know what we've done before tonight. The Finance Committee had the opportunity to look at the planning board meeting, the email that was sent. I'm not sure which Jay sent that to me, but I did share that with the rest of the committee, some of the background that you had sent to add to the meeting. So I feel like people have enough information to kind of get into the discussion, but do you want to speak, Holly, or do you want somebody else to speak? You're muted. You're muted, Holly. You have to unmute. That's okay. There you go.
Attorney.
What's your preference? Would you?
The attorney is present and he probably has more information on it than I do.
Okay. So you are Holly and you're the property owner and you live in Dartmouth.
I live at, yep, 33 Hillcrest Street in Dartmouth.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll turn it over to the attorney to speak.
Sure.
How you doing, everybody? John Catino Law Group. I represent Holly and John Cabral, the owners of the property. We also have with us Joseph Hamill, who represents the solar company who's looking to do the project there. And I think he has a presentation he'd like to make first, and then I'd like to be able to address any concerns or belay any concerns that were presented a couple of days ago. Joseph, are you there?
Let me just ask a question. How long is the presentation?
It's just a quick talk, basically providing some background and understanding like the financial background behind this.
Okay, if you could just make it brief, only because we have a long agenda tonight and people have had a chance to review some of the information, but I do want to give you the opportunity to speak, so.
Again, my name is Joe Hamill. I'm with Next Era Energy. We are the solar developer looking to do this project, and due to the fact that we cannot do a use variance on the property, we're looking for a zoning change to general business from the single residence B. And this project is going to just be on a project that's fairly remote when it comes to other properties. It's tucked in the back in the woods that doesn't have any budding landowner residences next to it. And this project would bring some solid revenue to the town. We're talking about investing upwards of $10 million in capital investment for the project, which would generate about north of $1 million in tax benefits to the town over the next 20 years. And this would bring construction jobs, it would bring many local jobs that would be benefited, including site grading, landscaping, civil activities, all these sorts of things. And local materials would be used for the job as well in terms of gravel, asphalt, concrete, dirt. So there is going to be an economic stimulus that's going to be coming to the town as a result of this project for it to go through. Not to mention during construction, you have the non-local labor that would also be brought in that would benefit in local restaurants, gas stations, housing, these sorts of deals. And this project would be a benefit for the town in that it's not going to raise the tax burden on the town. It's not going to require hiring of new police, firefighters, teachers, or new roads to be built to service it. We are looking to get an easement with Eversource to access it through their property. So this would be fairly secluded, and this project does comply very well with the 2016 sustainability report that Dartmouth has in terms of the previous solar activity, the goals of being a leader in the state, and the benefits to the town. Again, if you consider the pilot payments, the tax revenues that the town would receive, as well as the alternative, which our landowner has expressed that they want to be able to use this property, and if it's not for a solar project, if it doesn't get rezoned, then they would stay in single residence B, and they're looking to do chapter 40B or some sort of housing that would cause some extra tax burden for the town. So this is overall, I think, a great benefit for the town, and we're looking to be a good partner and do what we can to make a good project for the neighbors.
Okay, John, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, if I could. I know we had the planning board meeting, I think, on Monday, and there were some concerns raised about what would happen to the property if it were switched to a general business zone, and it would be forever switched to a business zone. And I think because of the format of the meeting, I wasn't really sure how to raise objections as they were coming up by some of the members, or at least to address them. In fact, there were a couple of chats I had tried to mention a couple of things to the chairperson and some of the people, and it just wasn't getting through. So again, I'm more used to the face-to-face raise your hand meetings. In any case, one of the concerns that I think was most prevalent by two of the board members was that once rezoned, the landowner would then have a property that, you know, if the solar project were to fall apart or die or terminate early, they would have a commercial zone property that then they could theoretically get a big box store in or something like that, which would go contrary to what the neighbors' interests would be, because the neighbors are signing. By and large, I think we have almost 30 signatures from neighbors who all like the idea, approve of the idea, would get behind the idea of a solar farm back there. But as I understand it, the concern was that then if this fell apart and there was a big box store, that would go against those ideals. And then, so a couple of things that I wanted to address. The parcel that we have, we're trying to get rezoned, is landlocked, apart from access to an abutting parcel also owned by Holly and John Cabral, and also abutting another property owned by Eversource that is on Cross Road. Now, there is a right to access that property through the Eversource property. It's an easement that is 100 years old, if not older. So the owners have the ability to get access and use it. But we'll to sort of solidify or bolster the project, we're working with Eversource to get a specific easement as well. Apart from that, excuse me, apart from that, there's no other way to access that lot other than going through the residential lot that's owned by Holly and John. So if, for example, the lot in question were zoned general business, and then the solar project were to cease, a box store would have to get an easement from the residential lot owned, with the house that's owned by Holly and John, which wouldn't work. The town would never approve, I would imagine, a big box store permitting, because they could have to get permitted to put one in to be able to even. So what I'm saying is, I don't think the town would end up giving a permit to a big box store to build if their access is through an easement through residential property. So I'm not really sure how that's sort of a real concern. But apart from that, I offered drafting a restrictive covenant, whether by the owner of that lot, the owner of the adjoining lot, still both the same owner, but specific to the lots, that would say that as long as this lot was zoned commercial, it would only or could only be used for solar farm or similar venture. I mean, whether it's solar or wind or whatever would sort of address the concerns that were raised. The previous to this, I think the last meeting that was held on this a month or two ago, someone had suggested or recommended a deed restriction. And the concern with a deed restriction is that a deed restriction goes with the land forever. So if a deed restriction is granted and then later on the property is sold, that's it. It rides forever. There's no way to change that. There's no way to do anything. It really ties the hands of the landowner and future landowners as well for what they could do with that property. And I think that's overly burdensome. Whereas a covenant, which is an agreement with the town that says we won't do X or anything outside of A based on the zoning you grant, then there's nothing else they could do. Even if they tried to petition for another project, it couldn't go through. The other thing is, and I wasn't at that meeting. I wasn't aware of that meeting until after it already passed. So I had no opportunity to really work with town council. I had reached out to town council to try to get something going for a covenant. And their response to me, and I can forward it to whoever wants to see it, was that we don't draft documents unless the planning board specifically asked us to. In other words, so I'm not really understanding what their role is for the town. I've worked with other towns. Town council works very regularly with builders and developers for restrictive covenants and easements with the town for almost any kind of development you can think of.
I can clarify that, John. So
Yep.
Our town council works for the town. They
Mhm.
don't work for developers or residents or situations like this. So that's all he was saying was, if the planning board directs him or if the select board is directing him to assist, there's a lot of petitioned articles that come in, and it's not feasible for town council to review petitioned articles from residents. So unless it's prompted by the planning board, directed from the planning board, or the select board, or the finance committee, they don't review that or provide that service.
Right. So, I'm sorry. So if I can address that too, and again, it's one of the things that was raised by at least one of the members of the planning board was that, well, you say that you'd offer, paraphrasing, of course, but you say you'd offer a covenant or some document, but we don't have it. Well, I guess my point is we're more than willing to and happy to put something together, but I guess as evidenced by the email, and Sean, you just said it, unless asked by the planning board or some other committee, I can't ask town council to do it. My proposal would be that I would draft one, right, and I would send it to town council. In theory, one of the boards or members of the boards of the committees or departments would say, Mr. Council, Mrs. Council, these are our concerns. Does this document address those concerns? And if not, can we make this address our concerns? And that's, I think, how I've done it in the past. That's how I would like to do it moving forward. It seems to make sense, but I guess it has to come from the planning board. So the objection we got on Monday about nothing having been offered, I think is a little unfair because we can't initiate that with town council. And you confirm that, Sean. So
I have an understanding of where you're coming from, and I think that people have had a chance to see both sides. And I think this is beyond whether we think the idea of a solar farm there is a good idea. I'll tell you, I've only been on the finance committee for a short period of time, but in the time that I've been there, I think the finance committee is very respectful of the work that other boards do on their particular topics. And when decisions come to us that are either a split vote or not in favor, we have some concerns about going in a different direction. I don't know tonight how people will feel about this, and I'm sure we'll have some conversation, but and I think that there are some questions about what alternatives the homeowners or their representatives have to meet the objective that they have. But I think that some of what you're bringing up is not possible to be rediscussed in the Finance Committee context. I think it's been talked about in the Planning Board context, and it was a long conversation. It went on for quite a while, and I think that people really covered all different aspects of what the issue was. But let me ask the committee, do people here tonight have questions about this? Anything that any of the people who are here to present could answer for you?
Yeah, I'd be inclined to say that this belongs at the zoning, at the planning board. I agree with you 100%, Terry. I don't see where we are in a position to take a different direction than the planning board wants to take. So if they're looking for information to be able to make this work, I think you have to go through them, would be my thinking.
I have something else I would like to offer if I can. I would say that, the planning board meeting where it was talked about, I believe was the April 27th meeting, where it was initially talked about, and one of the members had brought forward just a general concept. I was never given any direction to take it to town council. And then it became more of an issue at the public hearing on Monday night. So again, I never received any direction to take it to council. So I don't know if that's something that, I assume it can't happen after the public hearing. I don't know if anybody else can bring it to town council. That I don't know.
Well, let me come back. Think about that for a minute. Let's come back to the Finance Committee. Do any other Finance Committee members have questions of the people who are presenting tonight? Gloria? Oh, okay. You're muted, Gloria. There you go.
Is that better? Okay, sorry. Working with two computers here. This question is for Christine and members of the planning board. So we hear about a restrictive covenant option tonight. So is this something that can go back to your board and be discussed again at a later date? I mean, I just feel like this is an inappropriate place for this to be discussed right now. I understand why it came because of the timing and how we have the articles to go through. But I'm just wondering, it sounds like this new information based on the letter also that John forwarded, that we saw from John that came to us. Is this something that can go back to you?
Ms. Hammond, Ms. Bancroft, may I make a comment?
Sure, absolutely.
I was the one vote on the planning board in favor of this project. My colleagues were not, for the reasons that have been described. My name is Steve Taylor. I'm new to the planning board, but I want to first be clear that I don't know Holly Cabral or any of her attorneys, but I do understand the basics, which is that a solar farm in that location is vastly superior for the town of Dartmouth from a purely financial perspective, even before we get to the abutters, than any possibility of a future subdivision and more housing and more school costs and all the rest of it. And so I think it is an important thing to consider. I had the feeling many of my colleagues, even those who voted against me, made a point that this was not necessarily a bad project, but that past laws and the fact that zoning goes forever sticks us with things. And the restrictive covenant idea makes sense to me in the sense, or a deed restriction, if it would simply be promised that it would never be subdivided, because subdividing is the only thing that hurts us. A big box store might be unattractive for the abutters, but it doesn't hurt the town financially. So I do think I would welcome it coming back to the planning committee for a serious future discussion. I don't have any problem with that. I'm not the lawyer or the person who can decide whether that could happen, but I think this is a good project that's been caught up in some bad rules and old laws that we've had that need updating. And I'm hopeful that in our future 10-year master plan, we will update those rules. But I don't think we should be stuck in subsection B of the old laws when we face a good project that we might be able to approve, because the alternatives, such as whether it's chapter 40B or whether it's very high-end rich people housing with a fancy cul-de-sac and 3 and 5 bedrooms, the town loses 39 cents on the dollar for those latter things. This is a much better project than that, and we should take it back if we can possibly support it.
Christine, Gloria Ann is not here tonight. Who can answer Gloria's question?
Oh, I thought that Lori was here.
Yes, I am here.
Oh, where are you?
Yeah, she's the Galaxy Prime.
Oh, okay, there you are. I thought you, hi, Lorianne. So what is the answer to Gloria's question?
Gloria, can you repeat your question?
I was just asking about the restrictive covenant idea that has been brought forth. It's my understanding that was not discussed at the meeting, but again, I don't know that. I was just wondering if this topic can be brought forth back to your committee.
It was, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it was discussed at our meeting, and I think, like Steve said, the board was interested in that covenant. But again, we're Skyping, and it's a little hard to get all of this stuff. And we may have missed the boat on this, or we may not have, depending on how people look at it. But there's the possibility that if they get this all lined up, and all their ducks in a row, that it can't go to the June meeting. It could definitely come back to the October meeting. I think the June meeting is set because we've already had our public hearing, and I'm not sure we could reopen it and redo it. That's something that we'd have to look into with town council. But I think the board on the whole would be interested in looking at a covenant, but it would have to be written in stone before we send an article to town meeting.
So it sounds to me like what we're saying is that with the communication issues and, you know, who can send something to town council and how can that get worked out, it sounds like it needs to go back to the planning board to decide. And I guess we're not voting right now on this article, but I will say, I will ask first of all if anybody else has any other questions, and then I think we'll move on to the next article.
So the only thing I would say again is that the planning board has closed their public hearing and they have given their recommendations. So
Yes.
I don't know if there's some other way it can be handled, but for this round, I don't think, unless we're advised something from town council, I don't think we could bring it back before the planning board. You know,
That's what Marianne just said, but it could possibly come back for the fall. Not for
come back with the fall,
yeah.
or else maybe the applicants can present their case at town meeting and, you know, go with or without any recommendations. I mean, you know, I mean.
Okay.
Planning
Adam has a question. Adam?
Teresa, can I speak on that issue?
Yes.
In 1 minute, okay? I just want to hear Adam's question. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's something missing. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of problem with the proposed project. It sounds like you're concerned about this alternative reality that could happen. That seems like it could be rectified, legally with a covenant, a deed of restriction, whatever it could be. And it also doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem to me that it would matter if it's on the June meeting or the October meeting. Nothing's getting done this summer anyway. So why don't we just, push? It sounds like everyone's on the same page. Put it on the October meeting, and go from there. It sounds good. But by the way, this project sounds like a no-brainer from a finance committee's perspective.
That's information I would need more of. I don't understand that as well, but maybe other people do. John, let me go to John.
Yeah, just a comment. I'm not 100% sure on this, but if the planning board took this up in October, I believe, and again, we're not 100% sure, if this goes to town meeting as is, and let's say it fails at town meeting, it's a citizen petition. I don't know if they can come back to the October town meeting if it fails.
John,
I'm not 100% sure, but I'll leave it. So I think the best approach might be, if I'm true, is that the petitioner withdraw the article, take a second bite of the apple with the planning board, with more documentation on a covenant or a deed restriction that the planning board was very concerned with. The planning board liked the idea of a solar farm, but we aren't looking at a solar farm. We're looking at a zoning change. The finance committee is not looking at a solar farm. We're looking at a zoning change. That's the issue. So anyway, they might want to check in to see if the best strategy is to withdraw, because I think they may not be able to have a second bite at the apple if they go forward.
So we have a couple of good questions. Sean McInnes, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think, and I can check. I think if the planning board is, if it's a planning board article in the fall, I think that it can be presented. If the planning board is presenting the article and not a petitioner, but I'll double check that.
Okay. So
Sean, I believe you're true, but the planning board didn't even discuss that issue. Now, the planning board, a vote wasn't taken, but there was certainly a consensus that the planning board liked the idea of a solar farm, but to the deed restriction or covenant, and we didn't have that. It was talked about 2 months ago when they first came, and they came to us again with nothing in hand. So I would be careful about maybe the planning board might sponsor an article in October. I don't know if we will. We might support a citizen's petitions, we might not. But to say to the developer without a vote from the planning board that they might sponsor it in October, I think is a bit misleading.
Okay.
For my part, Sean, I think you and John are both right. I think it would be best if it came back in October, but it will need to require some collaboration from the citizen. But I think we could make it happen if we bring it back the right way. And I hope we can do that because it would sure as hell be better than a subdivision.
So it sounds like there might be a need for some assistance, somebody to act as a resource here to try to get something to move forward. And it sounds like that there are people who are willing to help if possible. I think we will. All right, I'll let you, John, one more thing and then we're going to stop. Okay, so go right ahead. Yeah.
Well, so, and I talked about it earlier. Town council isn't going to look at something from me, right? So I'm going to need someone from some committee to voice or coordinate with town council to have a document looked at or redrafted or because again, I can draft, till I'm blue in the face, but they won't look at it because it's got to come from the town. So I don't know how we can get that going, but that's my concern is, again, John just said, we don't have anything. Well, we'll never get anything if one of you or someone says, hey, town council, look at this and work this up. So I do need some sort of commitment from someone, at least verbally on the record, saying that they're willing to have town council work this up, because again, it can't come from me.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get that tonight, John. I think that what I hear from people is that, and I understand what you're saying, but it is really the responsibility of the petitioner to move this forward. So whether it happens for June or whether this happens for October, it might have to be extended in order for you to get the help. And I did hear that people are willing to help, but nobody can say tonight that they're going to ask the town attorney to assist you with crafting this language.
I'm again, and it seems like there's always a confusion. I'm not looking for assistance. I'll draft a proposed document. I need the town council to review it on behalf of the town to ensure the town's interests are protected, but the town council won't do that unless asked to do it by the town, not me. That's my only point.
I think I can explain the process a little bit better here. So right now, John, the planning board took a vote on it. They voted no. Now, as John was saying earlier, now if the planning board wants to revisit that after town meeting and work with you and Holly to craft the article so that the planning board is submitting it, then the planning board would say, okay, we're going to submit this article for town meeting. We're going to work on drafting the covenant. Town council, can you work with the owner's council to help draft the covenant? So that would be the process after this for fall town meeting. So the planning board would have to decide, yes, we think this is viable. We want to support the applicant. We're going to present this article, and the applicants, assisting the applicant to kind of make it happen. And then they would turn that over to town council and say, can you work with the applicant? Because we want to draft an article to present for the planning board to present at the fall town meeting.
And Sean, if you're right about that, I would be happy to do it as long as my chairperson, Ms. Miller, and my colleagues want me to help do it. I'll be happy to do the legwork, but I have to defer to the chairperson and my colleagues about whether the planning board wants to do that.
So for the purposes of tonight's meeting, I'm going to end this part of the discussion and we'll go on to Article E. And we will look forward to hearing back from people at some point in the future if this comes up again. But I think we've covered all the bases tonight on this.
Okay, thank you. I did have one last thing to mention, and I did mention it to Laurie. I mentioned it to Laurie by chat in the last meeting. There is a board member who has a history with this property, and she did vote, and so I'm not really sure that was proper, and I didn't know how to raise that objection.
I'm going to leave that to the planning board. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to Article E.
Okay, so Article E is the last The last one that's coming before you.
And it's a non-controversial one, right, Christine?
Yes, right. That's all I deal with since I've been here. This one is being brought by the select board.
Oh, my
The planning
goodness.
board did vote to recommend it going forward. This has got to do with the marijuana establishments overlay district, and it was drafted by town council. And basically what it would allow would be for cultivation and manufacturing within the general business district. It will not allow for recreation in the general business district, but it will allow for manufacturing and cultivation. Right now, the way the state regulations are, and with the town of Dartmouth's licensing, we can have 3 retail establishments, 1 cultivation and 1 manufacturing. Typically, what we've seen so far in many other communities, that cultivation and manufacturing pretty much go together, so it ends up being one combined entity in most cases. Again, this is for the entire district. It's not for any specific project, although there is mention of projects, potential projects and whatever, but right now the way this is written is for 1. Ultimately, it will change the name of the marijuana overlay district. And again, it will just add this one particular case. Unlike in the past, at the past town meeting, this is not being brought by any by a citizen's petition or anything like that. Again, this is coming from the select board. And I don't know if you have any other questions with regard to that, but
I'm going to open it up to the committee. Anybody have any questions for Christina or the planning board on this article? Jeff?
Yeah, is there still a deal pending with the Dartmouth Indoor Tennis Club on this, do you know?
So again, we're looking at this strictly as this is coming for the select.
I understand.
I don't know that. I mean, I
Okay.
don't, I don't know if Sean can speak to that or anybody else that, or
For
again,
the
that's it.
entire general business district. So a lot of people equate this to the tennis club, but this would allow it anywhere within the general business district.
Okay.
Any other questions? Gloria?
So has the planning board evaluated how many properties that potentially this could result in?
We do not. That number is hard to quantify because that's always changing based on businesses that open and close and locations of residences or maybe, childcare facilities. So it's kind of hard to quantify that number. We have not done that. We were not asked by the select board to do that. I guess we could have as part of our review of the particular article. We haven't had this very long. We were not involved in any drafting aspect of it. I can tell you prior to the last town meeting that the majority of the planning board members that voted, and two did not, one had to recuse and one was absent. They were in favor of the concept like I said, at the last town meeting to allow cultivation in one of these locations, cultivation and manufacturing in one of these locations. But again, those are kind of like moving targets as far as the numbers are concerned.
Did the planning board review the process in the spring to think about what the different positions were, and how is this article different from that article? Because it was an article, it was different language, I understand.
Right, so it was different language, and that one was brought again by a citizen's petition, and this one is being brought by the select board. So those are the biggest differences. The other thing I can say to you is this one was drafted by town council on behalf of, like I said, on behalf of the select board. As far as we know at this point, there's no second amendment to it or anything like that. So the planning board—
That was part of the confusion in the spring.
Part of the confusion the last time. The planning board did not know that was coming until the last minute. So we, the planning board
committee was in this, yeah, we were in the
right.
same
So I think, the planning board was probably, was somewhat concerned by that. The other part of it is, so the special permit contingency would still be in place. So any potential application that comes in this district would have to go through the special permit process, which also ultimately talks to all of the planning board's site requirements for the siting of a location for manufacturing and cultivation. The other thing I should say about this is just to avoid any confusion, any references to cultivation or product manufacturing all comes from the state guidance, and refers back to that.
Barry?
Yep.
Yeah, do we have a justification from the select board as to why they think this is appropriate?
I think they thought the article last year was, viable article. They supported it. I think they see a lot of property in the general business district that could be used for manufacturing and cultivation without having to construct a new facility. So I think that's led to this.
They voted in favor of it at the October meeting, right? The select board?
I can't remember how that vote went down offhand, because I know there was the amendment.
Yeah, there was some power, there was some,
Yeah.
so who was gonna give the permit and all that, but
So
I
now,
thought they recommended it.
Yeah,
I think they did, but they did, and then they wanted the special permit granting authority as well. And that's what the amendment. So they do support it, and I think they see the value in it, obviously. So they're bringing it back up.
Other questions from the committee? Everybody's good. Okay.
Yeah, can I just am I on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. As a finance committee, we would probably be interested in the financial implications of this. And I don't really know. I know about the particular case that was being brought up and what that was going to mean. But in terms of use of space in this town, can anybody comment on if you have the use be, whatever this is called, marijuana cultivation versus retail, which I think retail is going to be, let's be clear, a thing of the past for a while. But can somebody talk about the economics of marijuana cultivation as a occupant versus something else as an occupant?
I could speak to that, but I'm welcome for others to speak to that too, but I'm happy to speak to that.
I'm probably going to ask Greg to speak first on that, just to get your take on it, and then we'll add to other people. You're muted though, Greg.
I don't know if he heard you.
I'm really not an expert on the economics of marijuana cultivation.
No, but the benefit to the town, I think, to speak to the benefit to the town.
Right.
Well, obviously, in very generic terms, that will increase property taxes as well. It will provide new growth in terms of property taxes, and also there probably is a personal property component. So depending on the size of the facility, that could bring in, it certainly could be a driver of new growth. I really cannot, however, give any kind of analysis of what an alternative would otherwise provide. I will say that Class A office space typically is our number one in terms of per square foot. So whenever we get Class 8 office space, we're quite happy with that. However, the area where we've had most Class A office space has been in medical, and there's some questions as to how much growth potential there is in medical, and in other areas there may be retrenchment.
Thank you. I'm going to have Steve speak and then Jeff. Steve, did you want to add to that?
I am not an expert on the details, but just to refresh everybody's memory, the proposal that was put in front of us that went down because the one select board person wanted to take away permitting authority from others, that was the third thing that sent it down. It was otherwise going to pass easily. But the numbers that were in play at the time were $380,000 to the town for the first year and $540,000 plus in future years. And I don't know whether that matches Class A office space. It may or may not, but it's a very good number. And it also, because it's manufacturing, it's secured like Fort Knox. There's barely even any windows and there's no traffic. So it has no impact on the surrounding community or the roads or the neighbors. It's very quiet and it's very, very well secured, and it produces big money for the town. And it was a good idea. And whether another good idea in a new location in the general business district could be equally good or better or worse, it's generally going to be very good. I can't speak to whether it's as good as Class A office space, but it's certainly an awful lot better than what we have going on up and down Route 6 and Dartmouth Street and various other places. And one point that's been made repeatedly is if we don't do it, some other town will do it. So it makes sense for us to act sooner rather than later if we can.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Nope, I got nothing. That's
You
just
good?
what I was going to say. Thanks,
Debbie,
Terry.
Got good info? Okay. Somebody else? Adam, did you want to speak? No. Lou?
Oh, I'm good.
The value is for them also, the facility that's there, the old tennis facility, is probably a perfect spot for growing marijuana.
Right.
Exactly.
It's a tricky conversation because we're really not talking about a specific, even though it's in the back of people's minds because of previous information, we have to look at this as a general change. And so any other comments or questions?
Teresa, I have one other thing that I would like to say.
Yes.
The only other thing I would say
Terry,
to
Christine, call me Terry.
I'm sorry. The only thing I would ask you all to keep in mind too, with regard to this, is that the town would be entering into some type of a host agreement. There would be an RFQ process probably. So that also impacts the financials of it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's part of the reason why it's so hard to quantify right now.
Sure. Thank you.
Terry,
Point,
Terry,
if this were to pass, if this, it doesn't mean that manufacturing facilities are going to go in the general business district. So what we would do is we would do just like we're doing with the host community agreements for retail, is issue a RFQ, and there would be applicants that would respond. And if they had a location in the general business district, or they could have a location in the current overlay district. So just to keep that in mind. So just because this article passes and the tennis club applicant is still very interested, it doesn't mean that they're going to get that host community agreement, because it would be, put out to be equitable for all.
Okay, thanks. Bob?
yeah, if I remember right, don't we get 3% of the gross sales?
Yes.
As far as revenue, so it's not just the property taxes and the personal property taxes. It's the revenue.
That was the 500,000 that Steve was mentioning, and that was on 40,000 square feet of cultivation.
Okay.
That was the deal that we saw in October.
Any other questions? Anything else that people need to know from the planning board? Awesome. Thank you so much again for coming. I know you guys have been meeting quite a bit this week, and not easy topics to cover, and I really appreciate your time. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Very good. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. We appreciate being here. We'll have more to talk about in the 10-year plan.
Sounds good.
More later.
Okay. Okay, so for our purposes, and it is 7:45, we have meetings scheduled for next week, which is the 23rd, the 30th. We have a May 4th joint meeting, which we thought might get changed. It didn't come up at the last select board meeting, so it came up, but they reinforced this May 4th. And I think at this point, it's just as easy to stick with the May 4th meeting. And then we have a meeting on, I think it's the 7th. We have to be done with in terms of the concrete work that we have to do. And for those of you who are new, we have that warrant under every article. We say what we think, and that has to get drafted. And Gloria has agreed to type it, but it's much more difficult than just typing it, because we have 9 people, and unfortunately, we don't all think the same thing. So if you divide that up, well, that's a lot of work to do in a few meetings. I'm thinking we might have to meet more than Thursdays. I want to ask if people are open to meeting on Tuesdays if we need that night as well. Yes, is that good with people? Okay.
We're really busy these days.
I know.
Harry, can I just say, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Because the clerk wants the recommendations by May 18th, which is a Monday.
Oh, I thought it was May 13th.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is the 13th?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I had that wrong then.
Yep.
Okay, never mind.
May 13th, we have to get unless the dates change, and obviously, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with the town meeting and all that, but if we work on the timeline that we're on, it's May 13th.
I thought the clerk had to have the warrant set by the 13th, but recommendations by the 18th. That's what was last told to us, but I guess that's not right.
Right.
13th isn't a Monday.
I look at my calendar. Hold on here.
Terry,
Yes, Jeff.
if everybody's hunkered down and there's nobody working, can we meet in the afternoon hours or no?
I'm not sure about
Working.
that. Can we do
What?
that? Greg, do you know?
I'm working.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
working.
Okay. So
I'm
then
working.
there you go. And I think the more normal we keep things, you know, the better, unfortunately, because people get used to certain schedules. So when we did this before, we did Tuesdays and Thursdays when we needed extra meetings. So we have 25 articles in the regular town meeting and 3 in the special. Most of them, I think, are, you know, I asked Buddy, for example, I emailed him and asked him to send me rationale for the CPC. Then we don't have to schedule him presenting, and especially because the articles that I saw in draft form, unless somebody knows something beyond me, they don't look very controversial. They look kind of routine. Unfortunately, these zoning articles are a lot more controversial than I thought. Janine?
There was a discussion about shortening the warrant. Is that still happening? Or I'm just curious, is this going to be the number of articles?
I think it's going to be the number of articles. I think it's just the only thing that I heard that might come out is the signage, and I'm not sure that will from what they said tonight.
Greg and I have been looking at the warrant, and we thought initially we'll be able to pare it down. And then when we did, there were really only a few articles that we could push off until fall. So at that point, it's just, well, you know, there's nothing, you know, the zoning articles are a little controversial, but beyond that, there's nothing that's more than routine.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, if I said to you tonight, what are you ready to vote on? Is there anything in this proposal that you're ready to vote on?
I guess all the enterprise funds, all the, you know, all the ones that we see on a yearly basis, the housekeeping.
The CPC articles, I didn't see anything in the CPC articles that was controversial. There's nothing in there about renovating Southworth Library, for example. It's just the cemetery fund and the
playground
replenishing funds. Yep, the playground, and that kind of has to be done. So enterprise funds, maybe CPC. Budget, I don't know where we are with the school district. Greg, maybe you could talk just a little bit about the operating budget and the capital.
I expect that the schools will be getting back to us very soon. They did come to a tentative agreement with their major unions. So I think the school business administrator and superintendent will be sharing that with the school committee. And after that, I expect they'll be able to give us an affirmative answer as to whether their current request is currently going to be their final request. So the number you have in Schedule A is the number they gave us. We were waiting, though, on the contract negotiations as to whether that would change or not.
How about capital, Greg?
Well, during the meeting, I sent you the latest version of the warrant, which includes the capital. That is done.
Okay. We won't be able to vote on the enterprise funds until all the figures are in there, right? And you don't have the indirect costs yet?
The indirect costs that are currently in there are dummy costs. I mean, I guess you could vote on it, but obviously you wouldn't be voting on all the numbers, all the.
Yeah, and I don't want us to be voting twice. That doesn't make any sense at all. So I think once we know what the finals are, it makes sense for us to, but I think what people are saying is in terms of content, it is what it is.
Yeah, I could go through the warrant and tell you the articles where I believe they are finalized.
Okay, but why don't we do that then? That makes sense.
So 1 second here, I'm trying to figure out how to do this in the Zoom world. Okay.
I guess while Greg's doing that, Gloria, I can answer your question about the calendar. It is, I just have it up. So the May 8th, May 13th, the annual and special warrant to town clerk no later than today, the May 13th. And then it's posted on the 15th.
So in addition to the administrivia part of our recommendations for these articles, we've talked for over a year about trying to do some kind of a statement to the town on where we stand. I don't feel qualified to do that. That's not my background. I'm good with process and I can help edit and all that stuff, but to actually say, and we can't really have Greg do it either. We can ask Greg to do the guts of it, but I think we as a finance committee, and I've seen this happen. I was looking at the town of Foxborough today. They have an unbelievable strategic plan. Beppy, you sent Wellesley's. You know, there are some nice documents out there, but it's too much for us to do right now in this short period of time. I do think if people on the committee are going to stick around for the committee for a while, it would be great for us to have that as a goal, because I feel like people are owed a kind of big picture review of where we stand and what our concerns are financially. And we get caught up in some things sometimes that it's really not even our role other than to be supportive. I think we've done a great job of asking everybody on the committee for the information that they need to weigh in on things. But are people willing to work on that kind? Do you think that would be a good thing? An overall statement, at least. I'm not talking about anything as comprehensive as a strategic plan or anything more involved, but some kind of like a cover sheet that said, this is the state of the finances of the town of Dartmouth and how we made our decision. Gloria?
Well, I just had a question first. Greg and Sean, I mean, given the situation we're in right now with COVID-19, right? Is the warrant going out, the packet going out, going to have some kind of letter indicating to the town meeting members the situation we're in? And is there going to be anything different because of this situation?
I mean, we hadn't planned, it's hard to do. I mean, Greg and I talk about this a lot. It's really hard to say right now. We've got the state of emergency through May 4th, but it's hard to tell what the economy is going to do. I mean, Greg's kind of talked about it. Is it going to be a V? Is it going to be an L? Or is it just going to stay, down? So, or is it going to come back in any capacity? Hard to tell. I think by town meeting, we'll know more, I guess. If the government or their state's planning a much slower easing of, work and businesses, or easing back into work and businesses, then we can kind of make an assessment from there. But even at the state level, we're not hearing anything. I think, Greg was throwing out an estimate of a 5% decrease in estimated receipts, but we don't know. I mean, until people get back, it's really hard to tell. So yeah, I agree. I think by town meeting, we should have, some strategy in place for the year to come, but it's tough to prepare for right now.
Janine?
I think the state already, because they belong to a group of states that got together to make decisions collectively about this situation, I thought they already extended this to May 15th as far as the shutdown.
I don't think they have in Massachusetts.
No,
but
Mass hasn't done that.
New York
I listened to the governor's update today and they didn't, but I think regardless of the particulars, because it's either going to get better or it's not going to get better, but we know as a town that we have to have some kind of a framework to respond when this happens, and I don't see it. So I think the idea of, just my opinion, there should be something that comes from the town to say this is how we're thinking about things.
Yeah, I agree, Terry. I mean, maybe, we've implemented the spending and hiring freeze, and that might be something that, the finance committee might present at town meeting to say, we're supporting that for the time being into this next fiscal year. And we feel only non-essential spending only essential spending should be made by all town departments. And, until we can see what's going to happen in the future. So, or something along those lines so that the residents know that you're aware of the situation. We're taking every precaution now, and then moving forward.
My concern is that we have a good bond rating, we have a decent reserve, and we have a year where we're settling contracts in almost every area for pretty good numbers, for pretty good increases, and that was there before this happened. So I think it's got to be bigger than than the response to the pandemic. You know, that was what I was thinking when I was thinking about a statement of our situation. That was what I was considering before this. So what do other people think? Any other thoughts, or Beppy?
Well, you know, I'm on other situations. People are saying, well, what's going to happen this, we have a budget. Our year ends June 30th. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So to first say it's had an impact even in this fiscal year. What is the impact on this fiscal year? And what are we, that's just statement one. We were there, we had an expectation, this is what's going to happen this fiscal year based on the freeze that we've done, the, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I think, Greg, the thing is that we don't know, and I really do not know how the taxes that are were due on May 1 or whatever the date is, if they've been delayed till, what have they been delayed till June 1?
Yeah.
You're muted, Greg. Greg, you're muted.
Yes. It is June 1.
June 1, okay. But so we really don't know, but I think that's, and what's significant, whether there's a 5% or a 3% or something drop in that alone, just some statement that shows we're watching. And we were, you know, under all other circumstances, most the non-property tax revenue probably came last summer. So we probably already know a lot of that. So I think some sort of projection of what it's going to do for this fiscal year is a very reasonable thing. There's so much uncertainty about going forward, we just can't speak to that as yet. We're about to recommend a budget that for next year that's pretty flat line, and has some assumptions about some drop in revenue. But if it looks worse by the time we come back, we'll come back to you in October and try to do something more dramatic. Does that make sense?
So can I just say one thing?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so we have, we do modify accrual, and they have what they call the 60-day rule. So anything collected 60 days after the end of the fiscal year in terms of taxes can be factored into this year. So I'm not, unless we see a actual decrease in collections, I'm not too worried about that. I'm not worried about 2020. Frankly, I think we have enough fiscal flexibility in 20's budget that we should balance. Even in a worst case scenario, I see that we will be able to balance 20. Obviously, so to me, the bigger issue is 21. And, you know, should this be a long recession, obviously beyond. But my concerns are not so much with 20 at this point. They're with 21. I have not heard the state talking about doing 9C cutbacks. That's when they actually go into the year they're in and cut back state aid. And I have not heard a lot of talk on that. So that's very important to us. I do expect our local receipts will go down in the last few months. But I'm hoping, given our conservative budgeting, we have the flexibility to handle that again in 20. I'm much more concerned about, again, 21, 22. Obviously, if it's
and that's consistent. And just say, Greg, you've been saying that, and you're very consistent on that. My guess, it's going to be even more dramatic. I don't know. I just think some people are not going to be able to pay their property taxes. You're more confident than I am, but I think this is pretty grim for a lot of people whose jobs. Who knows? We'll know a lot more by October, or by the end of the summer. But I think just to say something like that is, Terry. Personally, I think you're absolutely right. As the Finance Committee, we should say we're in pretty good shape for this year. We're doing modest budget increases for next year, but being careful. But we really are going to come back if things look different, and then we might have to be a little bit more aggressive. I don't want to go into 21 or whatever the year is, 22 as yet, because it could be much worse, Greg, than you're thinking. It could be, and I think by then your whole talk about having strategic priorities, etc., would be even more relevant. So I think just
And that's-
put this
yes.
in that kind of context would be good for
And
my.
that's the other thing that I want to talk about. We've had some deadly joint meetings. They've just been, the finance committee reading their recommendations and the select board asking questions and just not getting beyond that. What ideas do you have about how to begin? Brian sent out his thoughts in terms of hope for the best, plan for the worst. Did a lot of research on what people are saying about,
right.
Help from the government, which it doesn't look like we're going to get a lot of that.
It won't be
Right. So how do we begin? How do we have a productive joint meeting with the select board and the school committee on May 4th? I'm looking for ideas.
Well, Terry, maybe a better plan. I mean, now you're kind of through the fiscal year, the budget planning process, but these are good discussions to have over the summer. So in preparation for the next year's budget process, where, as a finance committee, come up with a strategy that you feel you can present to the select board and say, this is our budget strategy for the coming year. And, to talk about things, or, who knows what it's going to be like, because this is an odd year, but where you would sit down and you have a joint meeting in, say, August, to say, okay, we want to be proactive about planning the budget process for next year. We feel these things are important, or, we think the town should focus on this. And then come up with some, I think the select board, they look to you for some guidance on financial things and financial items like that. I think they would appreciate that. And then you start that in August, and then you check in again in October to say, okay, well, we're gearing up to start the budget process, and Greg drafts a budget memo to the staff. And then prior to that, saying, hey, well, the finance committee wants to go in this direction, and this is their strategy. The select board has met with them jointly and approved it. And this year we're going to do the budgeting with an eye on cutting back costs because of the economics, or to direct costs more to this direction because they feel that that's going to be the future. So that's really for you all to kind of get together for that strategy.
Gloria?
Well, a couple of things. One is I had advocated last year that we have some kind of letter to town meeting, and I still strongly believe we need to have something. And I agree with Becky that, it doesn't have to be, too detailed, but at least let people know that we are very much, aware and following things closely. But as far as meeting with the select board, what we've all been hearing from Greg is some great concerns about the next coming year. And I don't know if Greg meets with the select board and has those discussions. So rather than wait for the summer, I think when we meet with them, we should at least, Greg convey those concerns so that they can start knowing, the forecast is not as great as you may think it is. So I don't know how much detail that requires. I don't know, Greg, what kind of conversation you want to share with them or how much information, but I think at a minimum when we meet with them, that if we do want to have some kind of strategic plan, focus, or goal for the future, that we at least, plant that seed with them when we meet with them.
I have discussed with them some financial projections. So.
The April 7th meeting that came up, the same topic that we're talking about tonight, and what the budget looks like, for next year, what the estimated receipts are. So Greg gave them an overview, not a detailed overview, but the same discussion came up.
Okay, other people. Let's hear from other people. Adam?
Yeah. So when you're talking about receipts and a reduction in receipt income, what comprises that? Are you talking about everything? Property tax as well as restaurants, hotels, etc., or is there something, or what are you talking about when it comes to what is it everything when you say 5%?
Well, first of all, I would like to stress we do not have empirical data at this point to give us clear guidance as to the effect of the recent crisis on our revenue. I have not seen numbers to give me any indication, but in my 5% reduction scenario, it does not factor a decrease in, it does not look at the tax levy as having been reduced. It does
what items are in there? In other words, what is the 5% reduction of what?
that we have three major sources of revenue, and I'm talking about the general fund very broadly. Tax levy, which is the majority, it's about 70%, and that includes new growth. We also have local receipts. That includes stuff like motor vehicle excise tax, that includes motel, hotel tax, that includes meals tax, that includes all the license and permit fees that we receive by building, planning, health, so on. Then we also receive state aid. In terms of order, the vast majority of our revenue is in the form of taxes. Number two is in the form of state aid. And number three is in the form of local receipts. The two that I'm most concerned about, the two that I consider to be the most at risk, are the state aid and the local receipts. So that's 30% of our overall revenue for the general fund. Again, I can't at this time, I have not been given guidance from the state as to what we would be potentially talking about in terms of any kind of state aid comeback for next year. In terms of local receipts, we have yet to see the numbers. Keep in mind, a lot of these revenues are collected by the state. So they have to give those meal taxes are given to the state, and then they give us our proportion. Same thing with hotel, motel. We don't collect them directly. So, and even motor vehicle, it comes through commitments, although this year would not be impacted. Again, there's a commitment of what we're supposed to collect, and there's what we collect. I'm assuming we will ultimately get the majority of our tax revenue. Do keep in mind that a very significant portion of our tax revenue comes in the form of escrow. It's paid not by the owners, but by the mortgage companies. And the mortgage companies, in turn, if they're not paid, it's their issue, not our issue. I'm most concerned about that 30% part of the budget. And, you know, I can't tell you if it's going to be 5. I can't tell you if it's going to be 10. I can't tell you it's going to be 2. As I get more info, I will certainly provide that. The one thing I will say, however, is we are a AAA community because we have built a significant portion of fiscal flexibility in our budget. And that fiscal flexibility puts us in a better position than many other communities in that ultimately we may lose a lot of that fiscal flexibility, but that keeps us in balance at least through 2020 and hopefully cushions us somewhat for 2021.
What percentage of the 30% is the hotels and restaurants?
I think we take a total of about, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think between the hotels, hotels and restaurants, I think it's about 1.4 million.
I feel like there's going to be a catastrophic hit on that type of stuff. I mean, restaurants are doing 20, 30% right now.
It is likely that's going to go down significantly, but if you looked at my fiscal forecast, our current, what we were taking in terms of actual, I'm not talking about this year, but last year was a few $1 million more than what we were estimating. So we can afford at this point a decline in our actuals and still be within budget because we were not fully using all of our local receipts. And one of the major reasons we were not is this very reason. We weren't anticipating COVID-19, but we certainly were fearful that after 10 years of economic growth, that eventually that would reverse itself. I spare you the long discussion of Greg, but suffice to say, before this COVID-19, the country had record consumer debt, record corporate debt, and that's very important, by the way. People forget that beyond the Googles and the apples that most companies are leveraged to the hilt, we had record federal debt. So in all areas, we are at record levels of debt. And I'm perhaps I represent an age where deficits matter, you know, the old Eisenhower type approach where it's important to have balanced budgets. But in my mind, that was a serious concern. And I think that can only magnify a downturn, the fact that we're so leveraged.
So Jeff and then Janine. Jeff?
I just want to make 2 points. I think the perspective we need to take and the responsibility of the Finance Committee is to do basically what's been done with the banking system since 2008, and that is perform stress tests on our budget and to be able to advise the select board where potential trouble could come from. I don't think we have a responsibility to the town. I think we have a responsibility to the select board, and that's how it should be phrased, that we're doing stress tests on the budget, and here's where the potential problems are. Secondly, I have a real question as to whether the protocol, when you say you want to write a letter to the town meeting, I don't know, is that protocol for the Finance Committee to speak directly to the town meeting? I mean, that's if I'm on the select board,
That's why we exist. Yeah, that's why we exist, Jeff. That's why they're advisors to the town meeting.
We're advisors not to the select board.
No, we're
To the town
advisors to
meeting.
the
Okay.
town meeting. We're independent of the select board. We're independent of everybody else, and we are supposed to be the fiscal watchdog for the town and to the town.
Does the select board know that?
Well, I don't know if I would think they do. But I think the concerns that I have precede this pandemic. So for example, we've settled all of the contracts that we've settled this year. There's no finance committee member involved in any negotiations. I don't know what Greg's involvement is in that process, but in my history, in my professional history, somebody was able to say, this is what we can bear and this is what we can't. And I don't even know if the select board has that information. So that's just a basic to me. So in terms of a letter to the town meeting, yes, it is appropriate. Okay. Most finance committees do. I think this goes back to Gloria's point about Greg's involvement with the process, or Greg or whoever represents the financial end of things, because I'm not sure that the select board has that information when they go into.
It's very important that you realize that the fiscal projections I gave you, as opposed to the Schedule A budget, because as you see, when you look at the warrant, you'll see a special article for the contracts. That's money above and beyond what's going into Schedule A. And the reason we separate that is because if it doesn't get approved, it's not part of the budget. But it's very important you understand the financial projections as I presented to you do include numbers for the contracts. Some of them are estimated, but they are factored in.
I think that, I just want to say one more thing before I call on Janine and then Beppy, but Greg, I think people understand that it's beyond that. So it comes up over and over again that when you ask departments, which position, for example, can we not fill because it's not essential? Everybody thinks their positions are essential. We don't have a guide to determine how we make those recommendations. it's still that's what I'm talking about. So
in terms of the strategic plan, that's certainly something that can, I as I told you, Terry, before, I focus on the financial policies and whether or not the budget meets those financial policies, but
I'm not arguing for a strategic plan. I'm not. I just wanted to make those 2 points that I think this is bigger than the pandemic. But Janine and then Beppy.
Well, what I was just on the strategic plan was going to say, often what towns do who do that, they engage consulting services for that.
It doesn't help us too much with Serped and some of the other people that I think that unfortunately puts people in his position to turn the responsibility over to the consultants, and I don't think that's helpful. One woman's opinion.
Okay.
Janine and then Beppy. Janine?
I'm sorry, was that 10 minutes ago that I
I
raised?
know, it was.
My intention was to circle back to your original question and express support that yes, we should have something, maybe a simplistic form to present to the select board about finances and our stand on it. And I also agree that it's important for town meeting, especially this year. I mean, sure, any year it would have been good, no doubt. But I think this year, people are going to be very concerned with what's going to be happening in town. So it seems like we should have something drafted for us.
Okay. And Becky?
Actually, thank you, Janine. I think I was really thinking the same thing. I do think, in fact, if there's going to be a letter, I think we could draft a letter and say, here's the near term, but here's the context in which we're operating. There's a lot of uncertainty, and therefore, bottom line, I would draft it and then have it be the basis for some of our conversation with the select board. We share it with them, saying we're planning to give you this to the town, so they aren't going to be surprised, but they also can we really think this is the time when we really going to have to do some serious long-term, medium-term planning about and as Jeff said, some stress scenarios and some other things. We really do have to do some hard work to think what the future could bring, and I would put it that way and say that that's one scenario. Even in a good way, things could be troubled, but you know what I'm saying. I don't want to take it too longer, but I do think sharing it with them first would be the way to go.
So could I ask for 2 people who would volunteer to work with Greg? Because it can't come from Greg, it has to come from the finance committee. But certainly Greg would provide the information that we're looking for, and we would ask the questions. A couple people to volunteer to write a draft and send it to me. We have to be careful on email. Send it to me, I'll send it out to people. But if a couple people would work on that draft and send it to me, I could send it out to people for next week. I can't hear you.
We're all jumping on.
There you go.
I guess what I'm a little confused about is what do you think should be in?
I'll send you 2, after the meeting, I'll send out 2 examples of what a couple of other towns do. And I'm thinking a pared down piece of that. But some State of the Union kind of a statement of, and it would be bigger than the current situation. It would be having to do with how tight our budget, we've been hearing from Greg for how long, how tight our budget is getting, and what do we do to maintain flexibility. I think that would be kind of the cover. And then maybe some specifics about what's in this warrant. So a statement about some of the bigger costs that are in there, for example, or some of the things that aren't in the warrant. So there's a lot that's not going to be in the warrant for this year because of where we are.
I mean, the other aspect is that we're seeing a lot on the construction or capital costs. We're seeing a lot of money being spent out of retained earnings.
Yeah.
You got to be careful. I think we ought to take a hard look at those right now, because this is not the time to start spending down retained earnings. This is the time to keep those, in relief.
Bob and Gloria, Bob?
Yeah, I like the idea about, the letter to the town meeting, but this is kind of a question to Greg, as far as, I'm not creating a lot of work for you, but is it possible to have the budget where we have, this is the budget, 5% reduction in inventory in revenue would equal a certain reduction in expense? In other words, a 5% reduction in revenue, a 10% reduction in revenue, or 15%, and just, drive that through the expenses so that we can come up with a balanced budget.
Well, I can speak for Greg. It'd be tough to balance if you get to 10 or 15% budget cuts, where you'd have to identify positions that would be cut.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but isn't that what we're all about? I mean, planning ahead,
right?
And getting some sort of plan so it doesn't fall apart because it's in a big rush when we find out, oops, we're not getting the revenue we're expecting.
Well,
it's got to come out of your balance sheet. You don't have any, it's got to come out of the balance sheet. That's what you got to look at.
And that's what we're saying we would start doing over the summer, is looking at, okay, what are we going to cut once we know what we're looking at long term. So you can certainly say, well, yeah, I mean, let's look at a 20% cut in the budget, and where's that going to come from? I mean, and also you look at it, this is a conversation to have with the school committee, because they're, you know, 2/3, 3/4 of the budget. So,
well, and they presented a budget this year that has nothing new in it. It's a level service budget. As far as last meeting that I attended with them, and Lou's been coming, but last time I knew they had presented a level service budget. So,
Are we hearing from them next meeting?
I got to talk to Jim, but again, Jim was going to go back to the school committee on the contracts, and then I think after that point, he will be available to come back and give final numbers to the board.
do you think that we could meet on Tuesday night this week and begin voting?
Unfortunately, we cannot meet on Tuesday because I don't believe I have enough time to post, even if let me think here, I need to have.
Under the governor's order right now, you can post.
Oh, I can? All right, well, all right.
Hour minimum. So not, you know, if there's other reasons you can't meet, Greg, that's fine, but.
No, it's just the 48-hour rule, and you can't include a weekend, and Monday's a holiday. So
Monday's a holiday.
Yeah.
If you can get it posted tomorrow, then I think that would work.
Well, I'll verify it. Let's put it this way: if it passed muster with the town clerk, then we should post.
Okay.
But if not, I'll let you know.
Because it's 8:20, so I don't think we're going to get any voting
I did
done
post
tonight.
already for Thursday.
I have Jeff, Gloria, and
I
then
just wanted to make one quick comment. Greg, I mean, it would be great if you could work up a projection. If we lose 10% of revenue or 12%, whatever the number is, and you want to maintain critical services without getting rid of people, the only place you can go to cover the funding is the balance sheet, right? Our reserves.
Correct. That is absolutely.
So I would like to know how, and I would guess I would like your workup on how far into the balance sheet we can go if we have to cover payroll, not out of revenue, but out of fund balances. I mean, those are the numbers that I think are important for us to really understand before we can even vote on the budget, because you're going to reduce capital spending if you got a problem there. If you can't handle it out of the fund balance, we're going to have to reduce the capital spending in the current budget that we're working on fiscal 21. You got to maintain those reserves.
We use the fund balance to pay for capital. The year before's fund balance is
right. But for the going forward, we might take another look at how much capital spending we want if we think we're going to be facing a 12% cut in revenue.
Yeah, right. I'm already resigned to the fact that our fund balance will be significantly less for the surplus, if you will, at the end of 21 will be significantly less than.
Right, but it'd be nice to see those numbers kind of in a summarized format so we can show them to the select board.
I will be willing to work on that if it's possible. Maybe you and I could even
I'm happy to work on that kind of thing.
Get together. And
you're also going to be working on the cover letter, though, Greg, with Beppy and did you volunteer to help?
I'll give a shot.
Yeah,
that for next Thursday. Next Thursday would be the earliest.
Can I just mention something about your cover letter?
Yeah.
You have mentioned about looking at other towns. You might want to just look at this town. You just have to go back several years. They used to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Can we find? Who can find that for us? I'm sorry.
It should be. It would be included in the town meeting packets of prior years, and those records are with the town clerk. So the town clerk should have examples of. I don't believe she has. I'm not sure how far back she goes on town meetings on the website, but if you go back 5-10 years, you will find, certainly 10 years, I know they used to do letters. So
I'll work on that. Gloria,
the town clerk would have that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the town clerk. So aside for if we don't meet Tuesdays, we have 3 meetings left. So in those 3 meetings, we have to meet with schools, go over the budget, all agree on this cover letter, and vote on all the articles. So.
get ready for the joint meeting to make it a.
And get ready for the
productive
joint meeting. So I just kind of want to focus us a little bit to see how we're going to accomplish all that.
You're gonna have to meet on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whatever.
From now on. Okay.
Yeah.
So schools are not coming in next week, right? We don't think they are.
Well, I'll
So-
talk to Jim and get back to Terry on that.
I think is Dartmouth open? I think Dartmouth is open next week, right?
Dartmouth?
Yeah,
The school vacation was canceled, correct?
that's what I thought. So they could, if they could come in next Thursday, we could meet as a finance committee on Tuesday and begin voting.
Okay, I will ask that, I'll talk to the school business administrator and through him, the superintendent, to see if they can come next Thursday.
Great.
So what I was going to follow up with is to help us along. We had talked about in the past to kind of get some of these article sponsors to give us a little summary as to, what is, why, whatever the summary it is, why they're having these articles. So for all of these articles that have been initiated as petitions, do we have summaries from those individuals? Do we know?
No.
We haven't heard anything about 23, 24, and 25.
Is that something we are going to hear?
Well, I can ask who I believe to be the main sponsor of that article, those articles, if he would want to put something together.
Because that would be helpful, because unless we hear from somebody, then we have to have something at least in writing.
And I'm assuming do you want the sponsor invited to the meeting like you had today for the.
I think if they want to, I think that would be fine. I think, for the planning board articles, I asked Christine to pull together the rationale for those 5 articles so that we could use that.
Because what I was going to say is if we have them ahead of time, what I can do is kind of put together a draft and then send it off to everyone. I know typically in the past what we've done is we've put it on the big screen and someone's typing away and then we kind of go back and forth and kind of wordsmith it. But to help maybe save time is if I had some of those ahead of time, I can just create a draft, send it off to everyone, and then at least you have something to look at while we're going through the articles, if that helps.
I think it would.
So Greg, I guess I would add, so it's one person, you could ask them to put something in writing and send it to me and I'll send it to the members and ask them if they want to present. And if they want to, we can schedule them like we did tonight.
Okay, I'll talk to him. You have his name on the warrant. It's one of our select board members.
Oh, I missed that. I'm sorry. So John, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would ask him if he can send something to us, then I'll send it out to people. And if he would like to speak to us, then we can schedule a time to do that. Okay.
So are we agreed that we're meeting Tuesday?
We're agreed. We're meeting on Tuesday. If it's possible, Greg has to
verify that we can do that legally, which
Yes.
I'm hoping that Sean says we can due to the new provisions of the law. So, if assuming that's all kosher, then we will meet on Tuesday.
And if not, we'll meet Thursday, Tuesday until we're done. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. So I'll entertain a motion to say goodnight.
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Night.